Hello and welcome back to Geek and Speak, the Geek and Speak podcast. Today, we are talking about our misplays and our mistakes. And we're not trying to be getting down on ourselves and beating ourselves up. Everyone makes mistakes. We're human beings, right? We're talking specifically about learning from those misplays and mistakes. So, joining me today is the person who thought of this idea, Jason. Jason, how's it going, man?
Going good. Recently got back from a hunting trip to Michigan with my dad. Spent some time up there with family. It was cool. I'm sure that you guys know I'm a sports guy. Got to watch the Lions win 2 games. Watched Michigan win. That was a lot of fun. Had a good time up there.
This is the first time in a while we've seen Jason without his jersey on. That's kind of crazy, man.
Yeah,
I didn't
yeah.
recognize you.
In all honesty, my dog has chewed a small hole in it.
Oh no.
Yeah, I'm kind of devastated. Don't let the smile fool you. I'm actually really upset about it. But I can't wear it right now. It's a small hole, but
yeah. Well, now their losing
I
streak
don't.
is going to start as a result. So,
You shut your mouth. You shut your mouth right now.
and also joining us today is Preston. Preston, my man, how's it going?
Going pretty good. Had Thanksgiving stuff with family last week. That was pretty fun. Ready to get back into talking about Magic though.
Heck yeah. And I am your host.
I guess I guess I did have Thanksgiving. Yeah, I
that
did
was a
see
thing.
family. Yeah, I guess a holiday happened.
Yeah. And then, hi, I'm your host, Morgan. Yeah, I had Thanksgiving too. I'm doing pretty good. We were supposed to be recording the Christmas episode of our show tonight, but that's getting pushed back. So I'm a little pressed for time as far as editing, which is stressing me out. But on a more positive note, as far as editing goes, this is my last week that I have a normal job, and I will be going full time as one of Goldfish's editors. So I'll keep editing their podcast, but I'm going to be picking up a lot of other editing over there. So, yeah, if you're not watching Goldfish, go check out their stuff. They make a lot of cool stuff. And yeah, it'll be starting here pretty soon.
Wait, Morgan. Shouldn't you be saying we make a lot of cool stuff since you're a part of that now?
Yeah. I guess.
Yeah,
I don't
not
know.
we. I mean, not me and Preston, but you and them.
Well, when we were at Magic on Vegas, Phil was like, "Oh, so you're going to be on the next season of Commander Clash, right?" And I was like, "I don't know, man. That's completely news to me. That so I don't think I'm ever going to be on camera over there, but I'll be, doing editing and stuff behind the scenes."
Right.
So, yeah. If you are new, make sure you're subscribed. Like this, give it a good rating. It depends on if you're watching this on YouTube or listening to this on Spotify. Do all that YouTube and Spotify algorithm stuff that makes us look good and helps keep the show going. And if you'd like to support the show more, check out our Patreon. You can join in our Discord if you do that. That helps keep the show afloat and will help us upgrade gear and help the show grow and all that good stuff. I think that's all I had. Oh, I guess quick news thing. So next episode, we're going to be talking about our favorite cards from 2023 as a wrap up the year, last episode of 2023. So if you have any cards that you think we should be keeping on our radar, let us know in the comments, shoot us a message, whatever. We have links to all of our social medias in the description as well. And then also, if you have other comments or questions you'd like us to get around to responding to, you can drop those there as well. All right. As we're hopping into this main topic, Jason, do you want to run through with everyone why this was a topic you wanted to discuss?
One of the reasons, really the main reason that I wanted us to talk about this topic was because the reason that I have been able to progress as a Magic player is because the people that I've played with over the years have been able to point out mistakes that I've made and said, you really should have done this when this happened instead of doing this. And after so long of playing and learning, I realized that the best way to become a better Magic player is to make mistakes and learn from those mistakes. And I just didn't want anyone watching this to think that if you make a mistake or if we point out some type of common mistake that people make, and you make this mistake, don't feel bad and don't feel shamed or anything like that. Like Morgan said, we're all humans. We all make mistakes, and it's okay. That's kind of why I wanted to have this conversation, was so that we could all understand that making mistakes is just a part of becoming better Magic players.
Yeah, and I think that's also just true across the board. I mean, yes, like adapting to your misplays and your mistakes is obviously going to make you a better Magic player, but as Master Yoda said, failure the best teacher is. And I think that applies to just the grander ethos of human life and existing. We're all going to make mistakes of varying degrees and stuff, and you can let it beat you up, or you can use it as a learning experience to build yourself up. And the whole the cliche of what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. Well, it's a cliche because it's true.
It is.
Just
You
just something
learn
to
more.
keep in mind. Yeah,
You learn more from mistakes than you do your successes.
I think that's true. I really believe that. So as we're hopping into this main topic, I thought it would be kind of nice and lighthearted to talk about maybe when we were getting into the game, if there were any things that made learning the game challenging for you. So for me, I can start this off to get the ball rolling. For me, I picked up the general rules of the game really fast. However, something that I probably didn't realize until I had been playing for a few months was that creatures don't tap when they block. And this is, Sean swears on his life it's not his fault, but it's definitely Sean's fault. All right.
I blame Sean.
Yeah. If you guys remember Sean,
I didn't know you guys
sounds
during
like a
this
Seanism.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't know you guys during this time, but I would 100% blame Sean.
So some of you guys might remember Sean. He was in a lot of our old videos. He was one of the founding members of the show. We haven't seen him in over a year on this channel. We'll have to bring him in for a podcast episode, though, because I want to do an episode where we talk Magic compared to other trading card games, because he's gotten really into some other games as well. But he was fundamental in teaching me how to play Magic. He got me into the game, taught me how to play, helped me build my first deck. And I swear to God, he told me that when creatures block, they tap. And back then, we weren't playing Commander. I didn't start playing Commander till I was playing Magic for almost 2 years. So creatures tapping when they blocked usually didn't matter as much in a 1v1 format, right? Because you weren't having to leave up blockers for other players. So it very rarely mattered. However, I remember getting called out on that, and it was like a huge awakening to our early play group, like everyone in our group. So there was like 4 or 5, 6 of us who all were like, what? What do you mean creatures don't tap when they block? Because they have to tap when they attack. A lot of their abilities require tapping. So we were like, well, surely blocking. Surely that means they have to tap. But no. So that was just an early example of learning the game. That's like obviously a huge misplay. Obviously that's wrong. But did you guys have any, like early on when you were learning how to play the game, did you have anything like that?
Well, as you know, my first commander deck was the white-green life gain deck. And early on in that deck, I had doubling season and a bunch of planeswalkers. And I know when we first started getting into Magic and Commander, we did not realize the plus abilities weren't doubled by doubling season.
Right.
So there were probably a number of games where I got to ultimate planeswalkers much faster than I should have been.
Doubling season with planeswalkers, if doubling season's out, they enter with twice as many loyalty, but then doubling season won't double them as you keep upticking.
When I first started playing, it was my little cousin August. He's been into Magic for a long time, and he taught me how to play. I stayed at his house for about a week because his mom had to go to New York for work, and I watched him for the week. And during that week, he really taught me how to play, and I really got into it. I was very interested, and we went to the store. We bought a couple packs. I remember before I started learning how to play Commander, I had gone to one Friday Night Magic, and I may have talked about this before, but I was playing in just like it was Modern, and I played a Dark Ritual, and I didn't know this, but he's like, the guy I was playing against was like, you can't play that card. I was like, what? Why not? I have the mana. What do you mean? He's like, no, it's banned in Modern. I was like, oh, well, to the graveyard. And then I left after that game because I was like, I don't know what I'm doing. The biggest one for me besides that is summoning sickness. Summoning sickness used to always get me every single time, and it like for a while. Like I was playing Commander with groups of people, and it was game after game after game where I would at least one creature I would play and try to attack with right away. Like you can't do that at summoning sickness ability.
So I want to get into a couple of specific misplays of mine from recent episodes of our gameplay series. I would say if you're not watching our gameplay series, go check that out. But the podcast gets like a fifth as many views. So I'm sure that if you're watching the podcast, you're probably already watching the gameplay show. But speaking of doubling season that Preston brought up on episode 18, Jason and I had a little bit of a back and forth when I played a doubling season, and we were trying to figure out how many, because I had several effects, like some were rounding up, some were rounding down, some were doubling, some things were getting doubled again. I had several instances on the stack of making tokens. This was the Throne of Eldraine episode, Wilds of Eldraine episode, and I was playing the Goose Mother. I think it probably didn't matter because I probably was still going to win that game anyways, but I think I ended up with probably like at least 20 more tokens than I was supposed to end up with in total. So that was fun. So is doubling season maybe this is a good question. Is doubling season a confusing card? Because I feel like it's like the hallmark of like go big, like a Timmy card, you know?
Right,
Like
right.
like it's kind of win more. So I don't think it's supposed to be that complicated, but I feel like there's these so many corner cases with doubling season where it gets confusing.
It's not confusing by itself. It's confusing when you have a bunch of those kind of effects working together. And it's confusing with planeswalkers, but that's because planeswalkers are confusing.
I don't think doubling season is necessarily a confusing card. I mean, I always just go back to what Prof says, reading the card explains the card. And my problem is I just read cards too fast sometimes, and I assume sometimes what the rest of the card says without actually being like, oh, wait, okay, so, okay, this hurt. I understand this fully now. So that's where my problem comes in. But if you just read the cards, there are way more confusing cards than doubling season, in my opinion. Like, Wheel of Misfortune.
Yes, yeah. Wheel of Misfortune, I hate how it's templated because it's not that complicated. You pay life if you want want a wheel, and you don't pay life if you don't want a wheel. Like it's not confusing. There was a way to word it that it wouldn't be so confusing, and I think that's part of why I like the card, if I'm being honest, is it's chaotic. But you're right. The other example for myself that I had of a recent misplay was episode 19. So this was when we were playing our least played colors. I was playing a mono black deck. And at the beginning of my turn, this was, I think, the last turn I got in the game. At the beginning of my turn, I had Nykthos, Shrine to Nyx in play. So you pay 2, tap it, and you get an amount of mana of one color equal to your devotion to that color. At the beginning of my turn, I didn't have enough mana to make it worth it. But by the end of my turn, there was definitely a way somewhere in my turn for me to sequence it to where I could have done it, got positive mana, and that mattered because I think the main reason, I mean, I don't remember what all people had in their hands and whatnot, so maybe it wouldn't have mattered. But I played Platinum Angel that turn. And if I got to keep my Platinum Angel, I think if it got back around to my turn, I would have won the game. And I had Swiftfoot Boots in hand. So if I had sequenced it correctly, I could have used the Nykthos to get Swiftfoot Boots out and equip it to the Platinum Angel to protect it. Because what ended up happening is it just passed Jason's turn and he removed Platinum Angel. Or I believe it was him who did.
I pretty sure I Source of Plowshared it.
That sounds right. And that was a big learning experience for me because there's two things. I think overall it just taught me that I need to slow down. I do that a lot. I get so caught up on hectic board states and stuff. And this is just kind of a byproduct of Commander, so it kind of is what it is. But I really just need to slow down and make sure I'm paying attention to everything, because I remember at the beginning of my turn, I was like, all right, Nykthos doesn't give me a positive amount of mana, I'm not going to activate it. But there was time later in my turn where I definitely could have, and it would have given me positive mana to a point where it could have altered the outcome of that game. But in order to do that, I would have had to slow down and come back to thinking about Nykthos at some point. But do you guys have any examples from games of the show, specifically maybe recently?
Well, I know one example for me is when we were playing the Uncommon Commanders episode, and I had Tatiova and Cultivator Colossus. I needed to resolve the Cultivator Colossus triggers before I drew the cards and gained the life from Tatiova. And I thought I could just do those together, or like one at a time, stack them differently. But I didn't realize that the entirety of the Cultivator Colossus trigger is just one thing that sits on the stack, and it all has to resolve before we go into the Tatiova draw triggers. Which I don't know if that mattered necessarily, because I still lost that game. But it definitely gave me an advantage that maybe I shouldn't have had.
Yeah.
And to me, like, my biggest problem when I get into misplays, I think, what I notice, at least from when I play in casual games, is I focus a lot on how I sequence stuff and don't really focus too much on how it's going to resolve once it's sequenced. Like, I just thought that if I had Tatiova on the battlefield, whenever a land comes in, that's going to trigger her. And so I would get to utilize her trigger while still being able to put more lands down from Cultivator Colossus. It just wasn't how it should have gone. That wasn't how I should have played it. It falls into what you're saying about you just slow down. I need to slow down a lot. That's a problem that I have in other areas of my life. But in Magic, definitely need to just slow down, make sure that I know what I'm doing and I know how it's going to work when I want it to work.
Yeah, and two quick notes about that situation specifically was that was kind of a weird ruling where you have to finish resolving Cultivator Colossus before you do the Tatiova triggers. Like, that is probably something that we should have just caught in the moment. But I mean, none of us caught it, right? None of the four people at the table caught that, just because we're like, well, the Tatiova's triggering every time he does that, so he gets to draw that other card. And that probably does change things, right? Because it put a lot more cards in your hand. It probably meant you put a lot more lands into play than you would have been able to otherwise, right? You're right. It probably didn't matter because you probably would have died anyways, because you
probably would have
taken out. Yeah, you were taken out first that game, so maybe it wouldn't have mattered. But
here's the thing. I have ways to get creatures back into my hand, and so in that deck specifically. So let's say I don't get all the I don't get to put all the lands into play on that Cultivator Colossus trigger. But maybe I pull the Phyrexian Metamorph back into my hand, recast that as a copy of Cultivator Colossus again.
Oh, right, because you copied Steven's Cultivator Colossus. Right.
Yep.
I forgot about that.
So maybe I'm able to do that with the cards that I drew from Tatiova, get another Cultivator Colossus, and then put all the lands from my hand onto the battlefield, but it's neither here nor there at this point. I don't think it made that much of a difference as far as what the outcome of the game would have been, but definitely a misplay that we should have caught at the time and corrected it when it happened.
Well, I think my biggest issue when playing is also being too fast, but specifically in the regards of I kind of just run into potential counter spells and removal spells. Like, I'm gonna do my thing. If you have it, you have it. If you don't, yippee, I get to do my thing, which I probably shouldn't do as much. Like, I can't think of any specific examples. I just know in general that's typically the thing that hits me the hardest during games, which is a form of misplay, but it's harder to quantify than obviously,
Yeah.
missing rules effects.
Well, this
That's
episode
typically
isn't.
my problem.
Sorry to interrupt. This episode isn't
No,
just
it's good.
about misplays. It's about mistakes as a whole. So that definitely
Yeah.
falls into what we're talking about.
Yeah, because if we're talking about just like failing to play optimally, we do that all the time. I'm sure every person in every game of our show has, if you thought about it, like maybe it's hard because usually they come out a few weeks after we film them. So maybe it's hard to reflect on that. But I think if people were honest and they had good memories, I think every single person in every episode has a moment in the game where if they had thought about it differently, they could have played more optimally. So that's another part about it. But I want to counter
Real
Preston's
quick,
point. Oh, go ahead.
So just about what you're talking about, exactly what you're talking about. I mean, go watch End Step. Look, go watch a couple episodes of End Step from our episodes. I guarantee you, there's moments in End Step where one person at the table is like, if I had just done this and this, I would have been able to win. So we all have those moments where it's like, man, I should have done this, this, and that, and then I would have been able to win the game. Dang it. And you know what? That's
playing games.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've definitely, and this is something that I want to talk about at some point during this is, I think this is going to fall when we talk about time and resource management, like doing stuff at instant speed when you can, when you should. It's like that's such an advantageous thing to do that a lot of early Magic players don't do because they don't know how powerful it can be to play at instant speed.
Yeah.
But that's just like, go watch End Step. We all have had moments in End Step where we're like, if I had just done this, I would have won.
Yeah. End Step is we have a few episodes of End Step that have like proportionally like a lot of views, more than you would think. But in general, I don't think as many people watch that. But I mean, yeah, if you enjoy our gameplay and you want to hear more about our line of thought, any of our immediate feedback about the game, or you want to know more about the decks we play, End Step is a great way to learn more. So definitely check that out. And to your point, Jason, on End Step, there are tons of moments where like, oh, if I had just done this instead, I maybe could have won. And we all have that one guy who he's like, oh, if I had one more man, I could have won. And we're like, okay, guy, yeah, sure.
We all have that one stave.
Yeah, stave. But that's really what it is on End Step. Like, sure, sometimes it is. Sometimes it is a matter of if only I had a little bit more mana. But it's every time we have a if only kind of moment, it's usually an actual I didn't slow down enough to think about all my options, and that made me play suboptimally. That's a lot of the time what it is. So, Jason, I want to go more about what you were talking about in just a second, but I wanted to, before we got too far away from it, I wanted to go back to something that Preston said recently, which is that he just plays into potential removal.
Wait, earlier you said you wanted to counter his point.
Yes, I was trying to make a pun. I was trying to be funny, Jason. I was trying to be funny.
I stepped on your pun. All right.
It's
all
okay.
right.
It's okay.
Don't worry. I'll leave that in the video and I'll edit myself, make myself look bad. It's okay.
So Preston, you were saying that like sometimes you're like, oh, that guy might have a counter spell. Oh, that guy might have his Swords to Plowshare. But you just got to do your thing, right? I think that's correct. Right. And maybe if you're that scared about it, maybe you try baiting it, right? Like that's something that I've tried doing. Like I said with the Wilds of Eldraine episode, right? I knew Steven had the counter spell on board, right? He had that fairy that you can pay one, sacrifice it, counter a non-creature spell. I knew he had that on board. And I had non-creature spells that won me the game in my hand or protected me long enough to get back to my next turn to survive. So I knew that I had to make him waste it. So I baited it out by playing Parallel Lives. I didn't need that. I didn't need the Parallel Lives to win the game. I already had more tokens than I needed. So I just needed to bait it out so that he wouldn't have the mana to interact with me again. So you can do that, right? Like you can try baiting it out. But even if you can't bait it out, like say you have 7 mana, you have a 7 mana spell, you can't try baiting it out then, right? Like if someone has 2 blue mana up, that's probably a counter spell. Someone's got a white mana up, that might be a Swords of Plowshare or Path to Exile, right? But what's the alternative? The alternative is you wait till what? They tap out. That might not happen, especially if they are like a dedicated control player. You might not get an opportunity to wait for them to tap out.
Also, if they do tap out and they are, I mean, you don't even necessarily have to be a dedicated control player for this. There are plenty of spells that you can play for free.
Yeah.
Tapping out almost means nothing now.
Yeah. And a lot of those free spells are going to be in the control decks, you know? So I think, I agree with you, Preston, that like, I think there is discretion and prudence that needs to be practiced here. But so, you know, if you can try baiting out the counterspell, if you can try baiting out the removal, make them get rid of something that doesn't really matter so that when you do play the thing that matters, they're like, dang it, I wasted my counterspell or something. Do that if you can. But if you can't, at least you could say you tried, because they might be bluffing too. Like I bluff counterspells all the time. I don't run a lot of counterspells. I like my blue decks. I used to have a like counterspell tribal deck, but outside of that deck, I usually only run like 2 to 4 counterspells in my blue decks. But I will bluff counterspell every chance I get. So you can play through that. And I think that applies to just life in general. We'll kind of get to that in a little bit later in the episode, that a lot of what we're talking about applies to life in general. Sometimes, even if you think you're going to fail, you just got to go for it, man. Like,
Add on a little bit to what you're talking about.
Yeah.
If you need to bait out somebody's spell, like if somebody has an answer for something and you need to bait it so that you can continue doing what you need to do that, like you said, if you can, but only if you need to. Because sometimes it's okay to let another player at the table try and bait out a spell that everybody knows is going to come out, and then you don't have to waste a resource, and you could just let one of your opponents take care of it. It's another thing that I'm sure we're going to talk about later, is understanding when you have to deal with something on the board and when you can let someone else deal with it.
Yep. Yeah, I think that's that could almost be a whole episode in of itself, is knowing how to interact. I feel like that could be a whole podcast episode of itself, because there are so many times that, I mean, how many times have you seen people like throw away their generous gifts or their beast withins or whatever, their removal spells, on just something to say they did it? You know, like it's like, was that worth it? Was that the scariest? Like maybe it even was the scariest thing on the board, but that doesn't mean it needs taken care of. Like you don't always have to just be going for whoever's in the lead. You can just wait for things that are problematic, right? Like say someone plays like, I don't know, Leyline Binding, or no, that's not the card I'm thinking of. Leyline of the black enchantment that sometimes comes in for free.
Leyline of Void
cards. Yes, thank you. If someone has that and you're a graveyard player, that's got to go, you know? So those are the things you need to be keeping in mind for removal. But if someone just plays a big creature, but you have some blockers and you still have opponents alive, who says you have to get rid of that right now? You know, so exactly. that could be a whole episode in and of itself, is creating scenarios and thinking through like when is the right time to do that.
And just like a whole threat assessment episode.
Yeah, threat assessment is a huge thing, and I think that is, especially for newer players, I think that's where a lot of their learning from misplays can happen, is they use their Swords to Plowshare or something too early, and then later in the game they're like, I really wish I still had that.
Like an example, if you're playing in a game and there's two opponents, right? One opponent has like Shieldred the Apocalypse, but then the other opponent has like 5 creatures that all have like ETB effects, but that's it. Like they entered the battlefield already, they got what they needed to do, and then now they're just done. Now they're just dumb creatures. That's it. And somebody uses a removal spell to kill one of the ETB creatures instead of the Shieldred, because their thought process is, well, this guy has more creatures than this guy, so he's a bigger threat. It's like, no. No, Shieldred is one of the worst creatures just to sit on the battlefield. Dude, like like small things like that. Newer players and even more seasoned players, I've seen seasoned players have horrible threat assessment. It's like, why would you go for that? That's not even close to being the biggest problem right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and to clarify, to like the examples that we were giving were mostly from our gameplay series, which we just started a little over a year ago. So it's, you know, pretty new, and we've been playing for a while. I'm in my 7th year of playing Magic, and I think you guys are roughly in that same ballpark, right?
Somewhere around there, 6, 7.
I
So
think you were playing maybe 6 months longer than me, maybe a year or so.
okay, so you know we're all sort of in the same general ballpark of how long we've been playing, and you know that doesn't make us sweaty know-it-all judges or whatever, right? Like, none of us have much. I have a little bit of experience in the pro scene, but virtually none. So, and then this game's been around for over 30 years now, so there are obviously going to be players who misplay and have rules questioning and sequence wrong and play suboptimally. There are people who will do that less often than us because they have more experience or whatever. But I hope that us even just being in it for as long as we have been can help take some weight off of your shoulders in knowing that, you know, even people who have like this is especially, I hope, encouraging to newer players. If you've only been playing for maybe a year or two, maybe not even, you will keep making mistakes. and I want to use this as the segue to kind of go into my last overall topic for the episode, which is how this can apply to life better in general. I am very interested in philosophy and human nature and anthropology. I'm very interested in that stuff. And so I don't think this is necessarily fair. I don't think you have to do this. I don't think you have to think like this. But I like taking things that are just mundane, like Magic the Gathering is just a card game, you know, but then finding greater meaning in it. I really like doing that. So what do you guys think about greater things that you can learn from Magic? Because we've already talked about a couple, right? Like, so even if you're scared, like Preston talking about playing into the counter spells or the removal, just go for it, man, because you're going to fail. You're going to mess up. Sometimes bad things are going to happen, but that doesn't mean you should hold back from your potential. And then we also talked about slowing down and appreciating the slower moments and trying to notice things that we wouldn't notice normally. So we've already talked about a couple of those, but do you guys have some other ones you'd like to mention?
One of the big ones for me is seeing what other people do, and instead of getting like upset about it, just be happy for them. Like so many times in games of Commander or even in 1v1s, I'll see someone do something and it'll be so weird or impressive. I just can't help but be like, okay, that was awesome. I don't mind if you win now. That was
Yeah.
just amazing.
Yeah.
I had it. It'll come back. It'll come back. It'll come back.
While you're thinking, I guess another thing that kind of applies to one of the ones I had already mentioned is just patience in general, like slowing down and appreciating things, but also knowing that like maybe now is not the time. Like, you know, we were talking about like maybe if you can bait out the removal, maybe you can bait out the counter spell, because like maybe you also know they have it. Maybe you saw them tutor it or something, right? Like maybe you literally know they have it and you have to bait it out. It's like, oh, I can't cast my Avenger of Zendikar on turn 7. Well, I'm going to be patient and I'm going to wait. And I think that can apply to life in general, because you might have a grand aspiration, and I can't stress enough how much just like discretion and prudence has to play into this. But you know, for every time that you just have to go for it no matter what, for every example of that, there also are the times where you just have to wait and wait for things to line up better in your life. So I guess discretion as well. Like, we could probably write a book, man. We could probably write a whole ass book about life
I believe
lessons
it.
playing Magic the Gathering. You probably could.
No, I think that I honestly, it just makes me think of this this Bruce Lee quote. I forget who the interview was with, but Bruce Lee, he was doing this interview, and he said to learn to accept defeat. to learn to fail is to be liberated from it.
Mhm.
And that's kind of one of the things that I take into life. And that's something that, you can take from playing Magic, because like you're saying, sometimes you just got to go for it. Like maybe this works, maybe it doesn't, but I got to try. You're never gonna succeed if you're too afraid to fail. Another thing that you could take from Magic, I touched on this earlier, was time and resource management. Being able to manage your time and resources right in game is something that you could take outside of the game. Oh, bump my camera. Whoops, sorry. And you could apply that to real life things. In game examples like playing at instant speed. If you either keep mana up or if you have abilities that you can activate at instant speed, you should always activate them at instant speed. Because first of all, it leaves your opponents with it. They're not entirely sure what you're going to do just because they know you have the resources available to you and you could do a variety of things depending on what colors you have available. But it also hides what possible moves you can make. One of the things that I see a lot of young Magic players do, there's somebody in our group in particular that was really bad at this for a while, is they'll sit, and if there's a situation on the table and it's not looking very good for them, they'll sit there and they'll look at the cards in their hand and they won't have anything to play. And they'll say, well, I don't have anything to do. You just told everyone at the table that you don't have an answer for what's going on. So now you basically just gave everyone a free pass to do anything, at least while you're around, because they know you're not going to be able to stop them. If you leave mana up and just don't say anything, or, be a little bit cryptic and mysterious, say like, you know what, I think I'll just hang back and play it safe for now. Even if you don't have anything, like your opponents aren't going to know what you have planned, and it might make them hesitate, and it might keep them from having that super big explosive turn that they could possibly have just because they're afraid of what you might have. And if you're somebody that never plays at instant speed when you can, like even something as simple as like doing Evolving Wilds, like you play in Evolving Wilds and you do it on your turn, do that at instant speed too. It's a small thing, but it helps build you into the habit of it. And sometimes doing Evolving Wilds and Terramorphic Expanse and stuff like that at instant speed, sometimes it matters. I know in my Tatiova deck it matters a lot.
Yep. I
So
personally believe that fetch lands rarely matter when you crack them, but sometimes it does, especially if you're grabbing like not Evolving Wilds, but like if you're grabbing like actual like fetch into like if you do like real fetch land into like a shock land or a triome or something, that is really important to do at instant speed. But like the Evolving Wilds and Terramorphic Expanses, I might be wrong, but I'm convinced that means almost no difference. But I definitely agree with your sentiment.
Yeah, well, I say that more for
Gain in the habit.
getting into the habit of doing it, and just as a Magic player being used to playing like that, because you will have more success in games if you play that way than if you telegraph every move you make. I guarantee it.
Yeah. Yeah, so we do have two examples from fans that I would like to point out. A while ago, because we were going to film this episode almost a month ago, and things just happened, man. I have two examples from fans that I wanted to highlight, and let's keep the conversation going. If you have something you want to add, drop a comment or whatever. But this is from AO and AJ, I believe, leaving up mana to interact. Real short and simple. I think this ties in a lot to like, let's just go back to this. I liked Preston's example enough that I'm just going to keep going back to it. Let's say you could just play into it, but like, let's say that I have 7 mana now. I already played my land for the turn, but I have another land in my hand. So next turn I'll have 8. I could drop the Avenger of Zendikar now. Okay, you could, sure. But if you wait one more turn, what if you have like Tameo safekeeping in hand or something, like a way to protect it? I think that leaving up mana to interact is obviously good for like removal and stuff. But the part about it that I've often not played optimally is playing like keeping up mana to protect myself. I've had at least a couple games, maybe not on the show, but in my games, I've definitely had times where I've had Teferi's Protection in hand, and I've thought, do I need to leave mana up for it? And I've been like, nah, I'm okay. And I was wrong. I should have left the mana up for it.
Yeah, so when I brought up that point earlier, what I was specifically thinking about as the main example was my Light Pulse deck. Like a lot of the times I'll play Light Pulse turn 2 knowing I can't put any enchantments on it yet for protection, when I really should always try to wait for turn 3 so I can put her out and then immediately put one of my enchantments on it. That was the main example I was thinking, but otherwise, yeah. I think you don't always have to be so cautious. But that is an example of where you would want to wait.
Especially because Light Pause is so scary and telegraphed, and people want to get rid of it as quick as possible. Yeah.
So I think that that's an excellent point to make. And I think it goes back to what I was saying earlier, where leaving up that mana to interact, you can either use it to interact with something that's going on the battlefield, you can use it to protect yourself, like you're saying, or you can use it as a bluff and slow people down or stop them or prevent them from doing some crazy stuff. And as far as keeping resources up, I like to do a really good job. And I think I do this to a fault, because I think what happens is I'll be worried about protecting myself too much, and I won't do as much on my turn just to make sure that I have mana to protect myself. Sometimes it works out for me. Sometimes it's really helpful. Like in the least played colored game, when I left 9 mana open, I had other stuff to do with that 9 mana on my turn, but I left 9 mana open because I was like, it's getting down to it. This might be the last turn for me if something happens. Let me make sure that I can save myself.
By God, it's good that you did.
It came back around to your turn. You almost put me at 3 life, but quickly, I put out Gandalf. I put out the 1 ring, and I was good. And that if I didn't do that, if I didn't save that 9 mana to do that, I lose that game 100%.
I could have one more win this season if it wasn't that for that, Jason. You should have just played out your stuff.
No, I don't think I should have. I think I made the right call. You should have sequenced your mana better, sir. That's what it sounds like to me.
Yes. I believe that was the same turn that I was talking about earlier on in the episode. I like that. I also like that we have documentation of a lot of our games. Like we obviously don't film every game of Commander that we play, but I mean, because of all the preparation we have to do for our show, it's a good amount of what we're playing, and it's a good I think highlight of what our play group functions, like how it functions. Like we do sometimes have to build new decks for episodes and stuff, but a lot of the time we're just playing decks we already have. So
or you playing with cards we already have.
Yeah. So I also like that we can talk about commanders we have in games we've really played, and if people really want to go check that out, they can, because it's all on our YouTube channel. So the only other fan example worth highlighting is this is from longtime viewer Michael. He says, forgetting triggers. So I decided to build decks which have much less, as sometimes less is more. And I've noticed I've been on top of my triggers, and in return is much smoother. The games are much smoother, where nobody has to wait ages for my turn to end. There's definitely examples of that. I haven't done this that much, but I have had a couple decks I've taken apart and a couple decks I've dumbed down because there were too many triggers and it was getting annoying to keep track of. Do you guys ever find yourself doing that?
I had to do that with Tatiova.
Yeah.
The first time I built Tatiova, because I used to run Omniscience in Tatiova when I first built it, because Omniscience was one of the first mythics I ever pulled. And that deck was so good. It was so good. But just so many things would happen because I was able to literally put everything onto the battlefield. And when you have so much on the battlefield, putting one creature, one land onto the battlefield in my Tatiova deck can do a lot. And it's just a ton to keep track of. So I actually, like yours, I had to dumb down Tatiova, so to speak. Just take out a whole bunch of cards that make it way too complicated and get the board state too crazy. And it definitely makes the deck more fun and easier to play and easier to pilot. And I can basically hand my Tatiova deck to anyone who knows Commander, who could, play. Even if they've never seen the deck before, they can pilot it pretty well just because it's no longer as complicated. And with Joyra, Joyra gets crazy complicated, although I'm not going to dumb that one down because that one's supposed to be a crazy deck.
Yeah, people haven't got to. I can't believe that there hasn't been an opportunity for you to show off your Joyra deck yet. But I guess people will see it.
Not yet.
People will see.
It's too strong. It's not the strongest deck ever built, but it's for the other. If I had played it in every single game that we've played, I probably would have won all those games.
Yeah, I think the only time I've ever seen you sometimes have kept one land hands with that deck, and those are the only games that we've beat you. I feel like every other game with Joyra you've won.
But I win some games with one land in my hand.
Preston, do you have any experience with that? Do you ever find yourself either avoiding certain cards or have decks that you decide are too complex and you just don't stick with them? Or have you ever had something similar to that?
I don't really build decks that get that complicated usually. I think the hardest one for me to keep, or other people to keep track of, is the Light Pause deck. Yeah. Just because when there's 15 enchantments on there, remembering each and every one is kind of a pain, which is one of the reasons like I haven't like changed it at all really, but I don't pull it out super often because it can be a lot to keep up with, and it's just really strong. So that's probably my most
here's what I was gonna say. Here's what I was gonna say to that. It's not that people think that reading all the enchantments on Light Pause is a pain. It's like, oh, it's so much to have to read. No, it's like, oh, it's so much to have to worry about. It's not reading and keeping track of it that's annoying, Preston. It's the fact that it's coming at my face is annoying.
I actually agree with Preston.
I'm slapping you with a Bible every time Light Pause comes in, basically.
Praise the Lord. I actually agree with Preston. My main problem with Light Pause is just, I was like, because when I sit down to play against Light Pause, especially because it doesn't come out that often, because it's one of Preston's stronger decks, he just has Mercy on the play group and doesn't pull it out as often.
Every time he does, I pull out Joyra.
I will either mulligan aggressively to get removal, or I'll play a deck that I know has a decent amount of removal, and I'll just the annoying part for me is like, does it have protection from this color? Does it have the protection from this card type? Like those kind of things are the things I have to pay attention to, and it's just so hard to keep track of. But
it is really annoying when you cast like a murder and it's, oh, he has protection from black. He's like, what? When? What?
Yes. Two very specific examples. I have not taken apart my Prosper deck, but I do not play it very often anymore. And there are a couple cards that I took out because they were adding to the shenanigans of because with Prosper, there's it's playing stuff from exile, but some things are like, you can play this till the end of this turn. You can play this till the end of next turn. You can play this till forever. It's just a lot to keep track of. And I know that's not the same thing as necessarily triggers, but it's a lot to keep track of. So I don't play that deck as often. And then I really like the Celestis, the 3-mana rock from Midnight Hunt. I do not have it in any of my decks anymore because I do not like keeping track of day-night. It's a great 3-mana rock. And there are decks that I would love to have it in there. I hate keeping track of day-night. And because of that, I don't have it in any of my paper decks anymore.
Like if you had those decks online, you'd probably put it in there.
Yeah, I have it in a couple historic Brawl decks on Magic Arena, and I have it in one of my Magic Online decks. And it's fine on Magic on digital clients because it'll keep track of it for you. But in paper Jason, I know you're gonna think it's not that bad because you have a werewolf deck. You prepped yourself for that. Like you know what you're getting into. But man, because a lot of the time, not always, but I just kind of avoid day night in general. Like there are a lot of day night cards I'm like, oh, this is a sick card, but I don't want to have to keep track of this. So I actually do just avoid the mechanic because it's too much to keep track of.
Not everybody has the stones to run a day-night deck, man. What can I say? It's not my fault you're not built like me.
Well,
Yeah, we're not furries like you are.
I feel like a ritual of this podcast has just been Preston calling Jason a furry. Like this is at
He's
least
got a
the
theory.
third. This is at least the
He's-
third time that's happened.
He's got a theory.
Do you
I'm
guys have
not
any?
wrong.
Do you guys have any closing thoughts or final messages you want to leave with the fans before we wrap up this episode?
Pay attention to your mistakes because they will help you make less mistakes.
I think if you took every single rule in Magic and also all of the questions people ask, like how do these two cards interact with each other, and put them in a book, it actually would be as thick as the Bible, probably. So you don't need to feel that bad about getting something wrong. Literally, no one can keep all of that straight.
Yeah. Yeah. I think even the best of the best players are going to play suboptimally sometimes. Just, you know, if you find yourself making the same mistake over and over again, that's when you might need like some kind of, I don't want to say intervention because that seems extreme for a card game, but like you probably need to be harder on yourself for like trying to get it down. But especially if it's like, oh, I've never had these two cards in play at the same time before, or oh, I slightly misread this card or something like that. That happens. Don't beat yourself up over it. Just do your best to retain it. Do your best to learn, grow, get better. That is the story of life.
It's important to just be self-aware. If
Yeah.
you keep making the same mistakes, just try to acknowledge I'm doing this wrong every time. Why am I doing this wrong so often? But again, that doesn't make you a bad Magic player or a bad anything. It's just a mistake. We all make them. Just got to correct it if you want to get better.
Yep. And that's going to do it for this episode of the Geek and Speak podcast. No Q&A, but we do have a little bit of time. Do we want to talk about, do you guys have anything cool outside of the world of Magic that you wanted to let the listeners know about?
I don't know if anybody cares, but on this hunting trip, I bagged my first deer.
Yeah, so was that your first time hunting or just your first time hunting deer?
No. So growing up in Michigan, which is where I went and visited family and hunted, we went hunting my whole life. It wasn't like I wasn't able to shoot anything for the first several years. And then when I did get old enough to start shooting, I only got to hunt for a year before we moved out of Michigan. And then since we moved out of Michigan, which was 2012, I've been hunting twice, deer hunting twice, including this trip I just went on since then. So I grew up doing it, but I haven't done a whole lot since I moved out of Michigan. But it was crazy because my dad and we got to Michigan a couple days before opening day. We go out into the deer blinds on opening day. And so like, this is one of the first times I've been hunting since I've moved away. I'm in a deer blind by myself. So it's the first time that I was able to hunt in a blind by myself. And it was just a cool moment. And, sun comes up around 7 a.m. We were all in our blinds by about 6:30. By about 6:45, 6:50, I saw him walking through the woods in front of me. And 7 o'clock, or maybe 7:04, when the sun was up and I could see, I saw him walking back through. And 7:10, as Bullet for My Valentine said, screamed, aimed, and fired. Except I didn't actually scream. But yeah, he only made it about 50 yards and it fell. It was a nice solid 9-point buck. I already had a little bit of the meat, had some of it turned into jerky. I made some venison meatballs last night with some barbecue sauce. So good. So good.
When we do finally film the Christmas episode, you got to bring some for the boys. Like,
dude, of course, man. I'm just trying to figure out what I'm going to make.
I honestly think that deer meat is some of the best meat. So
good.
I don't care
the
what
venison
you do with
that The venison I had ground into ground meat was ground up with bacon.
Ooh, that's nice.
Oh,
Man, I grew up around hunting, right? Like I have like grandparents who live out in the country and family and friends who like to shoot and stuff. So I've been around hunting my whole life. I have never had the itch to go hunting like majorly until like this year, because I've had like several friends who've been like, "Hey, do you want to go hunting with me?" Or "Hey, like Jason posting pictures of the deer meat he's got." And I'm just like, "Oh man, that sounds awesome."
yeah, dude, I don't have to buy grocery. Well, I don't have to buy meat for
Yeah, yeah.
a
You're
long
set for a
time.
bit. I had a friend in high school who his mom would go to Alaska every year and then come back with like literally hundreds of pounds of meat that they would keep in these like multiple freezers because she would hunt like bear and moose and these giant
Here,
animals.
I hear bear isn't very good.
I have only had bear once and I thought it was fine. Uh
I've
it's
I've
not
never
it's
heard
not
anyone go never heard anyone go crazy for bear meat.
yeah. It's well obviously it's really gamey, but like yeah, it is.
I mean,
Uh
all they eat is like berries and wild game.
yeah. So but it's a lot of food, which is kind of the point. It's like if you can snag a bear, you're gonna have plenty to eat for a while, I think is more of the point. And I think I know some people might be listening to this and being like, "Oh no, guns! Oh, people shouldn't have guns." But I'm gonna be honest, man. Besides the fact that I don't think that argument holds a lot of water, um, I think hunting is something that everyone should try doing at least once. Because I guess I did go geese hunting with my grandparents a couple times when I was a kid. Um, I think it's important because, especially in modern society where you can just go to Walmart and get your already processed and seasoned meats and stick it in the freezer, we've become very separated from food in general. And I think it's important to not necessarily that like have like this big spiritual awakening or anything, but just to have a little bit more appreciation from where your food comes from. I think it's important. I think it's respectful. And I know that when I'm in proximity of that realization, I'm a lot less wasteful. I don't let food go to waste, like I respect it and try to stay healthy and all that stuff. So I think it's a good skill. But because I kind of bounced off of you, Jason, I'll say that's my cool thing outside of Magic as well this week. But Preston, did you have anything to add?
I think hunting only counts if you do it with your bare hands. You're a bunch of soft little babies.
All right, I could take a
Let's
bunny,
see.
maybe.
Hey, I'll tell you this right
Not a
now.
squirrel though.
I'll tell you this right now. When I got there, when I got out, for this hunting trip the night before, my grandpa he gave me 9 bullets to hunt with for the whole week. I only shot one.
It's all I needed, man.
I don't really have too much else going on right now that we haven't already talked about, I don't think.
Oh man, see Preston,
Gotta
he's over here down talking the hunters and the guys who, enjoy deer meat. And meanwhile, he's over here like, I'm boring, I don't do anything. Ugh.
we're all like, get back to your roots as a human being. And
Yeah,
Preston's
get
like,
in
Some
the
of us
yeah,
great
have
out.
One
real
Piece is really cool,
jobs.
man. And with that, I believe that's going to take us to the end of the Geek and Speak podcast. Tune in a couple weeks. We will be talking about, again, our favorite cards from 2023. If you have any cards that you would like us to highlight, leave a comment. We'll try to come back and check it out, see if we want to change our own personal list to accommodate that. If not, we'll try to give you at least a shout out at the end. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, all that good stuff. Support us on Patreon if you can. And if you can't afford to support us on Patreon, that's cool. You could just go watch some of our other videos and help us with the ad revenue and stuff like that. We have lots of other cool videos you could be watching. So until next time, friends, we'll see you later.